Artoria Pendragon, the legendary king of Britain with a legendary sword and the Knights of the Round Table at her side, turns out to be a woman. Not only that, she looks like a 15-year-old girl. This was the very first Genderbend in the Fate series, and to this day, everyone still loves her. Now you might be wondering, why did such a massive change to a well-known legend actually work so well? Here's what I think. Saber, aka Artoria Pendragon, worked because the creators didn't just ignore how strange it was for King Arthur to secretly be a woman. They leaned into it and made it part of the story. Her backstory dives deep into how being a girl in that role shaped her entire life, her struggles, her feelings of inadequacy, and even how it ties into Lancelot and Guinevere's affair. It added emotional weight and context that wouldn't have been there otherwise. Plus, her design was perfect, modest enough to actually pass as a boy, especially when you see her wearing that black suit in Fate Zero. She legit looks like a guy when she's dressed up like that. And since King Arthur is more myth than hard history, this twist didn't feel out of place. It felt clever and well thought out. But over time, I feel like the reasons for these Genderbends started getting weaker. Just take a look at Fate Extra. Two famous figures, Emperor Nero and Francis Drake, were gender flipped, and honestly, the reasoning felt pretty flimsy. Now here's the thing. Both Nero and Drake are extremely well-documented historical figures, and back in their time, the roles they were portrayed in would have been impossible for women to take on. Nero, for example, wasn't reimagined to add layers to her story or explore what being a female emperor could mean. Nope, she was turned into a girl just to contrast with Artoria's design and personality. That's it. Francis Drake's case is even weirder. They threw out this wild idea about her secretly being Queen Elizabeth I, who supposedly swapped places with the real Drake. But that idea never really went anywhere. It wasn't explored, and it eventually just felt like some early series weirdness that stuck around. Not only that, but both of them were given over-the-top, super revealing outfits that didn't even try to make sense. Artoria, for comparison, wears long sleeves and knightly armor. Sometimes she wears a long cape that covers her entire body. Even with the skirt, it still resembles the long cloaks knights would wear back then. She looks like someone who could pass for a man if needed. Meanwhile, Nero's wearing a skirt too, but it literally flashes her upper thighs. And Drake is also rocking an outfit that puts her cleavage front and center. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these are bad examples. What I am saying is that the justification for their gender bending feels pretty weak compared to Artoria's case. By the time FGO came along, it seemed like gender-flipping male characters had become a gimmick just because it's what the series is now known for. The subtle storytelling and clever reasoning that worked with Saber were mostly gone. But that's just a small part of all the gender-bent characters in the Fate series. Behind the many reasons for gender-bending servants, I have a few that I think have the best explanations. Honestly, for me, these are the ones where the reasoning behind the gender bend is actually interesting and somehow makes sense. One of my favorite examples is Nagao Kagetora, or as history knows them, Wasugi Kenshin. In FGO, Kenshin is portrayed as a woman. And yeah, since Takeuchi designed her, it's easy to assume there's no deeper reason behind it other than, hey, let's make her a cool female warrior. But surprisingly, there's an actual real-life theory that Uesugi Kenshin might have actually been a woman. In the mid-20th century, a Japanese novelist named Tomeo Yagiri discovered a report about 16th century Japan in a monastery in Toledo, Spain. This report was written by a Spaniard named Gonzalez to King Philip II. In it, Gonzalez referred to Uesugi as tia, a Spanish and Portuguese word meaning aunt. Specifically, it was in reference to Uesugi Kagekatsu, Kenshin's nephew, the biological son of Kenshin's sister. And that's not all. There's more evidence that adds fuel to the theory. Kenshin reportedly suffered from severe stomach cramps every month around the 10th day, to the point that he would even plan military campaigns around it. Some historians think these cramps could have been menstrual related. Kenshin's death is also recorded in Todaiki, which mentions the cause as daichu, a term some believe refers to menstruation or uterine cancer. There's also a lot of speculation about Kenshin's personal life. For instance, Kenshin reportedly had an interest in traditionally feminine subjects like historical novels, poetry, and calligraphy aimed at female audiences. Also, Kenshin was the only person allowed to freely enter the women's quarters of the Kyoto Imperial Palace, which was basically unheard of at the time. Plus, Kenshin never married, had no biological children, and didn't take any wives or concubines. Well, there are stories and rumors about his relationships with men and women, but none of it is historically confirmed. See, this is what makes it interesting. The whole genderbend concept here actually has a foundation wrapped in a bit of mystery. Sure, we can doubt the decision to design Kenshin as a woman all we want, but anyone who starts digging into Kenshin's lore will eventually stumble across this theory, and when they do, they'll probably end up amazed at how the design actually ties back to it. Now that was one of my favorite genderbend reasons, but this actually reminds me of Okita. Historically, Okita Soji was recorded as a man, and his life is pretty well documented. But the reason for gender-bending Okita into a woman comes from a more feminine aspect of his story. During his life, he was famous for being extremely handsome, suffering from tuberculosis, and dying young. Well, if you didn't know, having a pale face and coughing between sentences was actually considered attractive in certain eras. It's kind of like a gothic vibe by today's standards, I guess. Anyway, because of Okita's pale and handsome looks, he's often depicted as having a beautiful, almost feminine face. Or in this case, as a woman. I wouldn't say this is my favorite genderbend reasoning, but it's still pretty fun to think about. Especially since Okita's whole theme in FGO ties into his sickly condition, right down to her color palette being noticeably paler than other saber faces. Another one of my favorite reasons for a gender-bent character is Miyamoto Musashi. Okay, maybe I'm a bit biased here because I really like Musashi, but I think they nailed it. They made it clear that the Musashi we know in FGO isn't the famous male Musashi from history. It's such a simple take on the genderbend concept, yet it leaves so much mystery to explore. You know what? I feel like her whole genderbend concept lets the developers do whatever they want with Musashi without ruining the image of the historical Musashi we know. And honestly, they did add or change one key thing for female Musashi, a spark of cheerfulness. I don't know if they added this to boost her waifu appeal, you know, since she's a female version, or to make her more relatable, but it works. The female Musashi we meet has the same easygoing, live-in-the-moment attitude as her male counterpart. But with that added cheerfulness and carefree streak, she comes off as more clumsy and playful instead of stoic. So, what do we get? A woman who lives in the moment is cheerful, kind-hearted, and crazy strong. And let's be real, this kind of personality absolutely won over a lot of fans. Plus, since it's made clear that she's Musashi from an alternate world, there's still a chance we might see the male Musashi show up one day. Yeah, those two examples are probably my favorite reasons for genderbends. But there are also characters who were genderbent after becoming heroic spirits. And honestly, this kind of thing sometimes makes me feel a bit weird. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But there are some post-death genderbends that I actually find pretty interesting. Take Da Vinci, for example. Leonardo da Vinci, the genius scientist famous for his theories, inventions, and paintings, manifests in the Fate series as a curvy female Mona Lisa. The reason I love this genderbend is because she straight up acknowledges that she was a guy in her previous life. History knows it. Everyone at Chaldea knows it too, but she intentionally chose this female form because she believes the Mona Lisa is the ideal beauty. I don't know. It feels oddly refreshing that someone would literally pick their ultimate form in their second life while fully embracing the fact that they used to be a dude. It's both hilarious and kind of amazing. What's even better is that Da Vinci's ability to redesign herself isn't just some random plot convenience. It ties into her achievements as a genius who mastered countless fields of knowledge. Thanks to this, she has the skill Pioneer of the Star, which is unique to heroes who marked turning points in human history. This skill lets her turn impossible feats into achievable goals. Since Da Vinci revolutionized so many fields, she possesses it at a high rank. And maybe through that knowledge, she picked up the Golden Rule, a skill that gives someone a naturally perfect, goddess-like body, one that doesn't change no matter how much they eat. Using her genius and these abilities, she essentially redesigned herself to match her ideal vision of beauty. Even though this adds nothing to the story, and yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just one of the devs' tactics to milk money, it's still great when you think about it logically. At first, people really felt weirded out. Even Roman called her a twisted pervert once. But thanks to her personality, everyone just accepts it now. I did say some for the post-death Genderbend that I like, but Da Vinci is probably my favorite. Well, how about you? Which servant do you think has the best reason for a Genderbend? Subscribe and see you next time.